The good people at Bosch sent me their Glide miter saw to review, and I plan on breaking this review down into 3 sections: unboxing and setup, alignment, and the features of the saw. And finally, I'll conclude with my general impressions. First off, let me say that I'm very happy with the packaging for this saw. It looks like the saw is really stabilized inside this box, and I like that. Anyone that's watched my videos in the past knows all too well that when I've exceeded the cut capacity of my miter saw, I've had to make a cut halfway through and then flip the board over to finish off the cut. Well, with my new Bosch miter saw, that is not going to be a problem because this new saw has more than enough cut capacity. I have the miter saw completely assembled, which took maybe 10 minutes because there wasn't very much to assemble. The next thing I want to do is to check that the blade is 90 degrees to the table. Now, the manual states that you can use a square for this, but I'm going to use a dial indicator because I find it a little easier to use and it's also a lot more accurate. So with my saw resting on its 0-degree bevel stop, it's only off by 0.06 of an inch over 1 inch, or 0.3 of a degree. Not too bad. Adjusting the 0-degree bevel stop of the saw was really easy. All I had to do was loosen 2 bolts in the back of the saw, loosen this bottom set screw, and then adjust this top set screw with the supplied hex key until the bevel angle of the saw measured 90 degrees. Really easy. The next thing I want to check is the alignment of the 45-degree bevel stops. This saw is capable of tilting to the left and to the right, and when it does, it rests on 45-degree bevel stops that can be adjusted. And those are the bevel stops that I want to check next. When you want to tilt the blade to the left, you need to make sure that the bevel range selector knob is in the 0 to 45 left position. And then you want to just raise the bevel lock lever. And then you can tilt the saw all the way to the left, and it will eventually come to rest on the 45-degree bevel stop. If you want to tilt the saw to the right at 45 degrees, just push the saw to the right and then turn the bevel selector knob to right 0 to 45. And then just push the saw all the way over and it'll eventually come to rest on the 45-degree bevel stop. In order to align the 45-degree bevel stops, there's a bolt in the back of the saw that you adjust with a wrench. And the manual calls for using the 45-degree portion of a combination square to align them, which is perfectly acceptable in my opinion for a miter saw. But again, I find it much easier and more accurate to just simply use a dial indicator. Once my dial indicator jig is 0 to 45 degrees, I can then use it to align the saw. And originally my right tilt 45-degree bevel stop was off by 0.3 degrees, which might be perfectly acceptable to you depending on the type of work you'll be doing with the saw. But I wanted to go through the process in order to describe it to you guys by making the adjustments in the back of the saw to the bolt. And I was able to align mine to within 0.03 degrees. And it was fast and pretty easy to do. My left tilt 45-degree miter stop was right on the money, right out of the box with the saw, and didn't need any adjustment, which was really cool. Probably my only gripe with aligning the 45-degree bevel stops is that the adjustments are made on the back of the saw, unlike the 0-degree bevel stop which was made from the side of the saw. This isn't really that big of a deal because you'll likely only make this adjustment once when you first set the saw up. The next thing I'm going to check is the alignment of the fence to the blade. You want to make sure that the blade is 90 degrees to the fence when the blade is locked in the 0-degree position. Now the manual calls for using a square for this step, which is a good way to do it, but you have to make sure that you don't contact any teeth with the square or you'll throw off the alignment. I'm going to show you a dial indicator alignment method that I like to use that utilizes a homemade jig that you can make really quickly from scrap wood, and it's a fast and easy method to use. Plus, it's incredibly accurate. Now this jig couldn't be any easier to make. It's just a piece of scrap wood with a block of wood glued on one side with a screw and the dial indicator screwed to the other side. Now the goal here is to get the tip of the dial indicator plunger and the screw, this line, 90 degrees to this side of the jig, and then we'll zero the dial indicator phase. Right there. Now in order to use this jig, you just slide it up against the fence and then slide the jig into the blade until the screw contacts the blade. Now I'm measuring 9/1000ths of an inch. Now with this direction of dial movement, that means my blade is tilted this way by just a little bit. Now I can take another reading by spinning the blade and take multiple readings around the blade. 8/1000ths of an inch, so very close to the last reading. And let's take one more. I'm going to spin the blade a little bit more and take another reading. Now this time I'm measuring around 12/1000ths of an inch, and all of the readings are going in the same direction, so they're between 8 and 12/1000ths of an inch. So I probably wouldn't even worry about this because it's so minor of an error, but because I'm doing this review, I'm going to go through this alignment process just to show you guys how it works and see if I can get my blade closer to 0 or 90 degrees to the fence. In order to make this adjustment, there are 4 screws on the front of the miter saw that you need to loosen. Now I did that already, and now I should be able to rotate this table until the saw blade measures 90 degrees to the fence. And as I'm making this adjustment, I'm going to watch my dial indicator needle. Now that I have it aligned pretty close to 0, I can spin the blade and take a few more measurements around the blade and see how well I did here. Right on 0 at this point. Let's spin it a little bit. And it's off by about 2/1000ths of an inch there. Let's do one more and then call it good. There we're off by 1/1000ths of an inch. There's one more alignment that I want to check, and that's the glide mechanism. I want to make sure that the glide mechanism glides the blade at a perfect 90 degrees to the fence. Now, we already checked that the blade was 90 degrees to the fence, but there is the possibility that the glide mechanism could cause the blade to travel in a non-90 degree fashion from the fence. So we can check for that using my same dial indicator jig. The only thing I did different was that I removed the screw from the front block of wood. I clamped the jig to the miter saw using this provided clamp that comes with your miter saw, and I zeroed the dial indicator at the front of the blade. Now I'm going to pull the dial indicator plunger back and then pull the glide mechanism forward and take another reading towards the back of the blade, and it's off by about 1/1000ths of an inch, so not too bad. I would say that that glide mechanism is in pretty good alignment. We can confirm this alignment process by doing it one more time at a different spot along the blade. So if I rotate the blade to another location and then take another reading towards the front, and it's reading 3/1000ths of an inch. So when I pull the blade forward, we'll see what reading we get. So it's right at 0. So again, that glide mechanism is pretty well aligned. Okay, so that's it with regard to alignment, and in general, my impressions with the process are very good. For most woodworkers, this saw could have been used right out of the box with no adjustments necessary because they were almost spot on. But like I said, I wanted to go through the process anyway so you all could view it. And in general, the process was pretty easy. The only exception being the alignment for the 45-degree bevel stops, which required adjustments at the back of the saw. But this was just a minor irritant. Okay, so now that I have the alignment process completed, I want to move on to some of the features of the saw. A feature of this saw that makes it really unique and stand out is the glide mechanism that is used to allow the saw to travel forward and backwards. Unlike other sliding miter saws, the glide miter saw doesn't use shafts and bushings, but a mechanism that is unique to the Bosch Glide. Because there are no shafts in the back of the saw takes up a lot less room, and the glide mechanism is incredibly smooth. One of the features that I really like about this saw are the extension wings that extend out on either side of the saw. And they lock down with these little red knobs. And you get about 21 inches from the blade to the end of the extension wing. In order to change the angle of the blade, you just need to loosen this front knob and you squeeze this red trigger underneath, and you can turn the blade to the left or the right, and it slides really smoothly. And underneath the base of the miter saw are little indents that correspond to specific angles, and the trigger will actually lock into these little indents. And then once you find the angle that you want, you just tighten down the front knob. Another feature of this saw that I really like are these really tall fences, which measure a little over 4¼ inches tall. And they also extend out by loosening these little lock knobs on the back. And you can get them to slide out, and then you just lock it back down. Really cool. The saw also comes with a nice hold down clamp, and there's a hole in the back of the saw on the left side, and there's another hole to receive this on the right side of the saw. It just drops down into the hole, and you just tighten down the clamp. One of the primary reasons why I was attracted to this saw was for its cut capacity. It's able to cross-cut very wide boards. Now, if you remember on my old saw, as I mentioned earlier, I wasn't able to cut boards that were very wide at all. On a wide board, I would have to cut halfway through and then flip the board over and then finish it off from the other side, and it was a huge pain. Now, on this saw, I shouldn't have that kind of problem in this shop because this saw should be able to handle most of the stock that I deal with as far as width. Now this board is 8½ inches wide, and on my old saw, no way. It would not have been able to do it in one cut. I would have had to cut halfway through and then flip it over. Now I'm going to be able to cut boards 8½ inches wide with this saw without a problem. Now this cut looks and feels very smooth. Now another thing I want to pay attention to as I'm using this saw is how it handles dust collection. Now I'm just using the bag that came with the saw, so there's no suction associated with this collection. And it handled that dust pretty good. There's some dust that's kind of sticking to the tool up at the top, and there's a little bit of sprinkling of dust in the back, but it looks like it captured most of the sawdust, and I'm pretty sure it'll do even better if I connect this dust collection up to suction like a shop vac, for example. Before I made my last test bevel cut and miter cut, I went ahead and cleaned off the miter saw of sawdust so we can see the effect of attaching a shop vac to the miter saw. And it did okay. There's still some sawdust in the back of the saw over here, and there's some sawdust that's clinging to the top over here by static electricity. So some of it is getting out, but it's not too bad. I would say that most of the sawdust is getting collected. So in general, I'm very pleased with the Bosch Glide miter saw. Right out of the box, the setup was a breeze and the alignment process was very straightforward. And anyone should be able to accomplish what I discussed in this review with no trouble. With regard to the glide mechanism, the saw traveled very smoothly and accurately forward and back. And also changing the bevel and miter angles was very easy with this saw. With regard to the cut quality, all of the cuts that I made resulted in very smooth surfaces. The dust collection was also very good and did improve some when I started to use a shop vac connected to the miter saw. So if you're watching this review and you're on the fence about purchasing it, let me say that I'm very sure you'll be happy with your purchase. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with a 10 being a very strong recommendation from Garage Woodworks, I give the Bosch Glide a 10. Thanks for watching.